joining the call. We had a huge number of registrations.
I assume it's going to be. I assume it's just going to be more very organic.
You got it. That's it.
I'm going to put my head. I'm going to put my headpiece in just so I can make sure I hear you well.
Good. But put your camera back on. We want to see you too. You got your glamour shot up. There you go. Good.
Can you hear me okay?
Can. You sound terrific. Okay. Right. Hey, everybody. I'm Charles Shapiro, the President of World Affairs Council. Welcome to our program today. Our guest is John Hope Bryant, the CEO of Operation Hope. Today's program is brought by you, thanks to you, the members of the World Affairs Council. Got a whole bunch of people joining us from the World Affairs Councils of Jacksonville, Western Michigan, Northern Michigan, Colorado Springs, San Antonio, and San Diego, and I'm sure I've forgotten somebody else. Bill Clifford, who's the president of the World Affairs Councils, the umbrella organization, is on. And we've got two former U.S. ambassadors on, Luis Moreno, former U.S. ambassador to Jamaica, and Capricia Marshall, who used to be the White House and State Department Chief of Protocol and has got a book coming out later this month. We're going to keep everybody muted except for John and me, so we don't use quite so much bandwidth. If you've got a question, please use the Zoom chat function. Oh, Naples is also here. I just got a message through the chat function. Send your questions to Fernanda Lucchine. She will send a message to everybody, and all you got to do is respond to her. And somewhere around 1:30, I'll start asking John your questions to get through as many as we can. John and I had a Zoom conversation. It's April 15th, although it seems like it was a year ago, doesn't it, John?
Yeah,
and so much has changed since then. John's the founder, chairman, chief executive officer of Operation Hope, which is the largest nonprofit provider of financial literacy, financial inclusion, and economic empowerment tools in the U.S. And as we heard, if y'all were on a little bit earlier, he was a regular contributor to CNBC's Squawk Box. In January, thanks to John's efforts, the U.S. Treasury Annex building on Lafayette Square was renamed the Freedmen's Bank Building. And the legacy of the Freedmen's Banks, established by President Abraham Lincoln, is the narrative of the work of Operation Hope to help people in the invisible class become fully integrated into our economy. John is a native of LA, and he founded Operation Hope in May 1992, right after the riots following the police beating of Rodney King. And John tells me he was 26 years old at the time. Make me feel like, what was I doing when I was 26? My God. So John, let's start with the 92 LA riots. I mean, do you see parallels between what's going on today with the 1992 LA riots? Have we learned anything since 1992?
So before I say anything, I want to say you don't do business with governments or companies or organizations. You do business with people. And the World Affairs Council of Atlanta is indeed fortunate and lucky to have Ambassador Charles Shapiro, to have Fernanda, to have Ladarian, and all the heroes and sheroes on your board, in your ranks, your volunteers, your advisory boards, your partners, your sponsors. If you didn't know whether you were making a difference in the world and whether what you did matters, well, now you know. History doesn't feel historic when you're sitting in it.
Right.
It just feels like another day. But that doesn't mean you're not sitting in a moment in history. And it takes about 25 years to look back at a moment and to see it as historic and historical. And I just want to thank you, Ambassador, for leaning in, for never giving up, for always being a hopeful light on the hill, and for helping to make Atlanta that international city, the only international city in the South. that place of thought leadership and moral authority in the world. Other places are great and they have their legacy, but this is ours because of people like you, Ambassador Andrew Young, and others. I do see parallels between 1992 and today, but I see parallels going back to 1968,
Sure.
also the Watts riots. And I see parallels going back to the Civil War. This is all one narrative for me, one dateline. By the way, the building that you mentioned that we helped to get renamed on the White House campus, the only building named in honor of former slaves on the White House campus in the history of this country, which we helped to get renamed 3 years ago, was defamed in the uprisings by people who didn't know their history and didn't know what they were writing on or why. And part of the problem now is there is no plan. It's just frustration. And anger is not a strategy. And frustration is not a plan. The most thoughtful and intelligent thing I've heard from all this weekend, and I've had so many conversations, I can't remember who to attribute this to, but a young person was talking to me this weekend when I was trying to explain to them that they were misusing Dr. King's quote. That Dr. King has said, and everybody said it repeatedly, that violence and riots are the language of the unseen and unheard. And I said, yes, but that is Dr. King acknowledging, not endorsing.
Yeah, let me just, I'm going to interrupt you because the paragraph before that, he says, riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. And of course, he is emblematic of nonviolent protest.
Yeah, but he was acknowledging that for some, his turn the other cheek didn't work. Malcolm X would say, I don't want to turn the cheek, I want to knock you in the cheek. So Dr. King was more thoughtful and his strategy took more time, didn't have such an immediate payoff. Obviously, we now know that's the strategy that worked. It resulted in outcomes and deliverables and legislation. And in many ways, what people are doing now to fight for freedom was because of Andrew Young, Dr. King, Coretta Scott King, and so many others, what they did. So it's hard for me to, it's such a sad moment for me. Ambassador Young and I cried last weekend. I cried because I've been shouting in the wilderness for 28 years, the same thing. He cried because he gave his life so that we might have life. And he's wondering whether this was all for naught. That he's used to black kids and white kids protesting together, not rioting together. So rainbows only follow storms, my friend. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. And the thing that made me hopeful this weekend, I'm talking to this young person to explain to them this misuse of the quote. He said, I understand we're misusing the quote. I said, excuse me? He said, I understand we're misusing the quote. But John, my grandfather talked. My father talked. John, I have been talking over and over and over again. John, no one's listening to me or my father or my grandfather. You, and by extension, Ambassador Young, and I guess he would say Ambassador Shapiro and all these other people, and the ladies who are now, our mayor and others who've got such an outsized voice, you can get in the boardrooms, you can get on TV, you can go to the White House, you can go in the corporate boardrooms, and they listen to you. They're not listening to us. We have to tear something up. We got to riot and protest. We got to shake things up before they listen to us. So maybe now they'll listen to us. We'll now pass the baton back to you. You go in and talk because they'll listen to you and cut a deal for all of us. Now, I'm not endorsing rioting or mayhem or tearing up private property or any of that stuff. But I must tell you, Ambassador Shapiro, that was a very thoughtful young man who said that to me. He felt like they had just run out of options. He wasn't trying to destroy, at least for his activities, private property. He was trying to, in his way, save America. He thought he was saving America. And he thought he was disobeying unjust laws. no different than Dr. King said, we must disobey unjust laws. And so, you know, I gave him a pass. I actually thought it was a very thoughtful comment, and start thinking about what else I need to do. Now, let me go back to your core question. Rodney King's riots was started with a Korean merchant who, because of his unique upbringing in Korea, would not look at a person in their eye because they was told that was disrespectful. So, and he wouldn't touch you with his hands because he was told that that was disrespectful. You weren't family. So when when a customer came in, Ambassador, to his little shop in South Central and said, I want to buy that, they would say yes, but wouldn't look at him. I would like my change back. They'd say yes. They put it on the counter, even though his hand was out. They wouldn't touch him. They put it on the counter. And then the black young man would look around and see nobody working in the store that looked like him, because he used his whole family to work as employees, not as an assault on somebody else, but he came to America with $40,000. He used that to buy a business, and they work upstairs, and the whole family works in the place. But because we were missing each other, there was no translation. We weren't being bilingual. And then a fuse lit with Rodney King. That Korean merchant was the first one to get torched. And that created a cycle of frustration and anger that burned 5,000 buildings, created $3 to $5 billion worth of damage. It was 50 deaths, I believe. I think it was 8,000 people arrested, lasted a week. That was the worst riot in urban history. This one, once the numbers come in, I'm sure will be larger because it was just multiple cities and all that kind of stuff. So I'm still waiting for the data. But that was about money. That was about poverty. It was about people for whom the police did not consider to be those that they were protectors of, but those that they were almost guarding from the rest of the world or overseeing in an open prison. Because they live in a 500 credit score. We lived in a 500 credit score neighborhood because we didn't have wealth. We didn't have opportunity because we were not viewed as stakeholders. Well, guess what? George Floyd lived in a 570 credit score neighborhood. Ambassador, this happened in a 570 credit score neighborhood. It happened over a $20 bill. Exactly. That was thought to be fraudulent. This was about poverty. And can you imagine, just to be really blunt, you know, my Jewish friends get discriminated against all the time. But can you imagine in an upscale 700 credit score neighborhood, a police officer putting his foot or knee on the neck of one of my Jewish or your Jewish friends who have financial and economic wealth, and the mayor's phone number on their speed dial? I think not.
Absolutely.
The consequences are just too high, professionally, financially, and otherwise. They just won't do it. They do this in these neighborhoods because they think there are no consequences. So civil rights is about guarding you against racism. Civil rights is about strengthening you in case it comes your way. Mm-hmm. And I can't get in your heart and change how you feel about me, but I can get in my heart and change how I feel about you. And we can't handle another one of these, Ambassador. I think the governor of Minneapolis said this. The nation is at a tipping point. And what's happening is we've devolved. You know, blacks used to wear suits and ties and as a uniform in the 30s, 40s, 50s. That was us modeling that American way, that spirit of we're all in this. We were proud. And then the 60s happened, right, with Dr. King and the 4 civil rights bills and Andrew Young and John Lewis and Dorothy Cotton and all these people, these heroes and sheroes. And Atlanta identified itself singularly as the southern city that decided to fight over money, not about race, right? That's a whole nother show about how Memphis and Birmingham could have been Atlanta, but they were short-sighted and argued over race, black and white. We argued over green. You get to then Dr. King is assassinated. Black power movement and rebelliousness. And, you know, see, I told you this stuff don't work. They killed Dr. King, they killed Malcolm X. Then we lost we lost the president and a presidential candidate the same year, I believe. Right. The darkening of America, the darkening days. Then you come to the Rodney King riots. By that time, you got gangster rap. Now everybody's dressed down, dumbed down. And gangster rap is saying, don't believe in America, believe in yourself and forget all this love stuff. Where's your car? Where's your money? Everything becomes about things. And now we are here. And yeah.
Let me, I mean, it's always, you said earlier, I mean, it's hard to judge history when you're in the middle of it. But it sure seems like in the past 10 days, at least for Americans, the earth has shifted a bit on its axis.
Yep.
That from a week ago, Friday night,
Yep.
your and my mayor and Ambassador Young and Killer Mike are giving a press conference in City Hall in the lobby asking people to stop looting.
No,
right?
demanding. Yeah.
And what you're seeing now is people who are rather, when you saw those people in Portland on that bridge just lying down for 8.5 minutes, right?
Yes.
And it has a gigantic impact.
Oh, yeah.
Muriel Bowser, since last night, the mayor of Washington, D.C., has had Black Lives Matter painted across 16th Street, a block from Lafayette Square, in letters that have to be 50 feet tall.
Yeah.
I mean, and people are listening, and unlike in 1992, the people out there demonstrating are diverse.
Yes. So yes, and you're seeing increasingly more white protesters than black, and that's a beautiful thing. And you're seeing them at all socioeconomic levels, and it is a tipping point. And this is beautiful, and this is the best of democracy, and this is who we are. And this is their Vietnam, Ambassador. This is their Vietnam experience. This is their searing experience. You know, racism, I think, I want to make sure I give people their proper credit. There was an actor, I forget his name, but he said, it'll come to me, he said, racism wasn't new, it's just filmed.
Yeah.
And
everybody's got a high definition video camera in their pocket right now.
Yeah, but if this wasn't filmed, no one would believe this happened. But I think it's so atrocious and it's so obviously inhumane that I think it took the most conservative, cynical people to go, okay, this actually exists. If we caught this by accident, it's obviously happening more than we know. We have to do, this is not who we are. And so you've got a lot of soul searching. My phone is lighting up with some of the most amazing people on the planet saying, what can I do? Now, this is a beautiful thing. I've created a Marshall Plan. There's a lot of people trying to jump on that right now to find if they can amplify, find their role in that. I'm talking to people I wouldn't otherwise talk to. I think we have a moment here. We can't handle another one of these, but we may not have to. COVID-19 was enough. That plus this is a black swan for Black America. It's the worst of all things at one time. But now the pain is being shared by white America and Asian America and Latino America and Jewish and Indian America. And we're also seeing, by the way, we're seeing women highlighted and featured in ways that we have never seen before. The uniqueness of Lance Bottoms, Mayor Lance Bottoms, and her beautiful message that maybe only a mother mayor could have presented.
Right.
Go sit yourselves down, stop destroying stuff. This is not who we are. I mean, she was almost lecturing like you lecture your child, but she did it in such a loving way. I'm not sure a man could have done that, right? And you've got all these other women who are making us, who are helping us to see our better angels. I am actually very hopeful, Ambassador. I actually think that something positive is going to come out of this that couldn't have happened without COVID in this. We would not be. We need a new Marshall Plan like we had in World War II, that to reset everything. I don't think we wouldn't have gotten there incrementally. We wouldn't have gotten there. I think it took something like this to shake us up.
So what are the elements of the Marshall Plan? Just the executive summary. What are you talking about? What does America need?
Are you talking about after World War II or now?
No, now.
Yeah. Education for all. I mean, K through college. K through high school is ridiculous. We're being left behind by every nation in the world. You cannot have a high school educated nation that's the largest economy in the world. It's supposed to be a superpower. And you banish racism and ignorance through education and exposure, by the way. So education for all, K through college, and this is what you might call reparations. And
Mhm.
as long as you go through college and you finish it up and you take a job for some useful purpose, we would call that an investment in America, and you don't have to pay that back. So you can go in the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, but you have to go do something. If you go through college, you don't get a job, you got to pay it back. But that would be the biggest investment, because a rubber band, once expanded, never returns to its original size. And everybody benefits from a more educated population. The vast majority of racists and people who are backwards in their views have lower education and lower exposure levels. So if you can open that door up, all boats rise, everybody wins. Financial literacy for all, because if you hang around 9 broke people, you'll be the 10th. The Freedmen's Bank was chartered by Abraham Lincoln after the Civil War, and run by Frederick Douglass, who people know to be an abolitionist, and you and I know him to be a businessman,
Right.
who owned $6.5 million worth of real estate in Baltimore, Maryland, and rented it out to working class blacks, gave him the financial freedom to be a civil rights leader. But that bank was chartered to teach free slaves about money, to put them back in the free enterprise system. And you combine that with 40 Acres and a Mule, which came 2 months before the Freedmen's Bank. And there was Lincoln's plan to put us back in the game. And then Lincoln was killed the next month in April. Something's weird about April. Lincoln was killed in April. Dr. King was killed in April. So financial literacy for all. Math does not have an opinion. Okay, but you cannot live in a free enterprise democracy and succeed without understanding the math. So financial literacy for all, education for all. This is a big one. Living wage for all. Now, no one's figured out how to crack this. I think we have. One of the biggest problems with this is who's going to pay for it. And half of employees in America are small businesses. So small businesses say, I can't afford to give my people a 20% raise. It'll crush my business. Okay, fine. Earned income tax credit would say, as Wall Street gets a bonus for working, this is not a giveaway program. You work hard, you do the right thing, you hit your marks on your job. If you make less than $60,000 a year, you're going to get a 20% bonus at the end of the year as part of your review. It's going to come from all Americans, not your employer. So EITC would give a staged bonus once a year for every American below $60,000, which is the vast majority of Americans of all races of people. That would put them into a living wage standard. And by the way, 70% of our economy is consumer spending. Right. So what are we going to do with that money? Put it back in the economy. So now the investor class, which is prospering right now, by the way, while the rest of us really are not, the investor class benefits. We're going to go buy more cars, more refrigerators, more microwaves. We're going to go on more vacations, the companies that they are invested in. So everybody wins, and the economy gets more GDP, right? So that's a huge one, and I think that would be the first raise for middle America and working class America since the 70s, right? And that solves a lot of resentment. I mean, a lot of reasons why we had this crazy election 3 years ago is that my poor white friends from rural America, who we ignored for 60 years after the Industrial Revolution, and then give them a way to get a boat and a second home again, and making $20 an hour for effectively a high school education. That dream went away with the Industrial Revolution. They rioted at the ballot box, Ambassador Shapiro, 3 years ago. Black folks rioted, and my poor white friends rioted, just in different ways. Black folks just are very more emotional, more dramatic about it, right? So no one's happy with this system. There's a way to solve it. Access to capital for all, qualified opportunity zones for access for equity investment, CRA modernization, which I've helped with, Community Reinvestment Act for access to prime bank debt at reasonable costs. Startups for entrepreneurship and small business at the grassroots level, because Walmart was started with a guy with a high school education and a storefront named Sam Walton. All right, so and he's the biggest retailer in the world. We got to realize that there is a Steve Jobs in the hood, not the hood, the hood, DA-HOD, the hood in America, and here on the west side in Atlanta, there's a Steve Jobs who became a drug dealer because he didn't have good role models and a good environment and no investor and no nurturing. There's more to it, but that's sort of the stuff off the top of my head that are sort of the big items that I think would have a transformational impact and would make us more resilient and bulletproof to our problems and more confident about our successes.
But you're not talking about racism.
I'm talking about classism. Look, the civil rights was waged and won in the streets. That was about race and the color line. Civil rights, S-I-L-V-E-R, is about class and poverty. it'll be won in the suites, not the street. This is about as much about class as it is about race. Again, there'll be, since the beginning of the world, there's been stupid people who are going to discriminate against you and me. But we don't have to make it easy for them. and we can actually make it quite penalized when you discriminate and when you act like a jerk. And that's, I'm talking about creating an economy and an environment that does it. I've asked major corporations, by the way, don't wait for Washington. Don't wait for City Hall. Use your budgets. Look at your budget that you spend every year. Don't do anything extraordinary. Where's your money going for advertising? Who's that agency? 20% of that to a minority firm. Who's doing your sanitation work in your office? Who's cleaning your offices? You know, who's doing your plumbing work? Who's, you know, where are you getting your interns? Where are you getting your apprenticeships? Just look at your budget. Who's doing your graphics work? And make sure that 20% of that goes to minority and women businesses, Black-owned businesses in particular, because they were literally left out of this equation, as we all know, and use that as your own social justice mechanism to create power where you are. And 10 ones equal 10. Racism, ambassadors, like rain. It's either falling someplace or it's gathering. So you might as well get out an umbrella and the color you like and start strolling through it, because it's not going to change. So we must. And I think that our white brothers have to start talking to our other white brothers and saying, this is just not okay. It's not cool. You know how smoking stopped in America, Ambassador? Anybody ever told you that story?
Tell me.
It wasn't stopped because the government said you're going to die if you, they put it on the back of cigarettes. This will kill you. That didn't stop it. Smoking stopped when it stopped being cool. Mm-hmm. When college educated people and those in suits and ties stopped smoking, then people would say, well, I don't want to do that anymore. That doesn't make me cool. It was that era's environment of social media, right? What's trending? So we need to make it trending to be an anti-racist. We need to make it trending to that being a dumb, I can't say this in a broadcast, but to be a dumb person is just not okay. We've made dumb sexy in this country. We've dumbed down and celebrated it. And we've got to make smart sexy again, here and around the world, because the world's looking at us as a role model.
I've got a question for you from Valerie Lopez de Frank, and it's about policing. And we've all over the past week, I mean, we've seen videos on social media, on TV that are just absolutely disgusting. She asks, are unions, police unions, part of the problem or part of the answer?
It's not just police unions that are part of the problem. It's an excellent question. If you go far enough in the North Pole, you end up south. So we have failed to give software upgrades to our social justice agenda. We've gotten lazy. We just sort of put things in place and left them there. Like, we're still protesting for 60 years as if that's our only strategy. So the wealthiest city in the world was 60 years ago was Detroit, Michigan. But they got lazy. They lost their sight of things. Now it's one of the poorest cities in the world. You know, Natchez, Mississippi was the richest city in the world in 1850. That's where the word millionaire came from. They had bad software. That was called slavery. Okay. Yeah. Unions were a wonderful thing when it was in the 1920s and 1930s, and they were trying to make sure the kids and elderly were not being abused, and that we set standards for base pay. That was actually early 20th century, all the way up to about 1930, 1940. They were beautiful. Unions were the best of America and an example for the world. But now it's become about protecting middle-class jobs. So I love what Delta CEO, and I believe Delta will come back, by the way. I love what Ed Bastian did. Ed Bastian said, let me give you something better. How about profit sharing? He said, when we do good, we'll tell our board, when we hit $1 billion in revenue, then that's our standard. $1.2 billion, that's what we reward to Wall Street. $1.5 billion, everything above $1.2 billion, we share with our employees. So that when we win, they win. Well, there's no miracle that when you get on a Delta plane, everybody's smiling at you, and the flight attendants are so nice, and the crew, because they're participating in the uplift, right? They are shareholders too. So the unions in the police department I'm not picking on them, but it's an old model. And a house divided cannot stand. That's biblical. So you cannot have a law enforcement sworn to protect the public, but chartered to protect themselves. That dog don't hunt, right? So we need a modernization of that relationship, and it's up or out. Either you're with a new vision or you need to leave. Every police officer needs to have body cams by national standards. Body cams are the new transparency. Okay, and there needs to be a buddy system. I forget what state this happened in, but I heard it was brilliant. A buddy system. So if you're a police officer and one of your officers, these are human beings making $45,000 a year who just had an argument with his wife last night, and somebody called him a schmuck this morning, and he's not feeling good about himself, and some drunk guy is going off on him, and so he's losing it. His buddy needs to tap on his shoulder and say, "You just tapped out." Tap him out. The other officer goes in. The officer that's tapped out and the officer that stepped out both get rewarded. They both get positive marks on their record. Good job, you guys. And when you don't tap out, you get a demerit, right? So you need a system that recognizes they are human beings and they're going to be in a highly charged emotional states. And you need a system that says, "I am your union. I'm your union right now. I'm trying to keep you out of trouble. Tap out, step out." And then we need intensive training like Dr. King does with the King Center and around training these officers and upgrading their software around human interaction. We do financial well-being training at Hope Inside at the Atlanta Police Department with officers because we found that officers are filing bankruptcy at double the national average, Ambassador.
Wow.
Sit on that one for a minute.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, I got a question here. I don't know who it's from. I didn't get the name. It says,
I'll make my answer shorter.
Okay, we've had a war on drugs, a war on cancer, a national effort to put a man on the moon, other gigantic national initiatives. What stands in the way of the same sort of effort, whether it's your Marshall Plan or your Marshall Plan modified or something else, through a national war on racial injustice and inequality? I mean, how come we as a nation cannot do that?
It's us. President Bill Clinton, if you don't listen to anything I've said today, and by the way, I've served Republican and Democratic presidents. My work has been honored at Operation Hope by 5 presidents, so I'm not picking sides here, right? I respect George W. Bush for what he did on Africa as much as I respect Bill Clinton and other people, what they did in other places. But here's a great Bill Clinton quote. "It's hard to get somebody to agree to the truth when the lie is paying their paycheck." So you have all these interest groups who just like things the way they are. Why mess it up? It's working well for me. That sounds great, John, as long as it doesn't cost me any money. I love what you're doing, John, but don't change my way of life. That's really fantastic. Don't blame me for it. Well, slavery was horrible, but I didn't do anything to you. That was 400 years ago. That's to rationalize is to tell rational lies. That dog don't hunt. So we have got to all say enough already. And I believe this is that moment, enough already. I think that the reason it's going to work, Ambassador, is no one changes in good times. They only change in bad times. Why would you change in good times? You change when you have to, when the pain is more expensive than the promise that you're willing to invest in. We now have a promise that we're willing to invest in that may actually create more GDP, more opportunity, more harmony. And so we have not changed because it's been in our unenlightened self-interest to stay the same and to rationalize bad behavior from our president or from our senators or from our own family. We have rationalized bad behavior, and now we have a reckoning. And I'm convinced that we're not going to fail this matriculation exam. I'm convinced. We are America. We are freedom. We are freedom lovers. We're obsessed with self-determination and uplift and opportunity. And we want to be better. We demand to be better. We are going to uplift and live our creed. And we will rise above our own limitations in this moment.
Are cities in the U.S. there's a whole bunch of them with Black mayors, Black female mayors in Atlanta and Washington and many other places with Black and or female police chiefs, are they doing better than cities that are governed by a more traditional power structure?
It's the wrong question.
Okay, what's the right question?
It's a good question, but it's the wrong question. The question is, do they have the right software? So my ideal politician has a Republican head and a Democratic heart. Okay. It's a party that doesn't exist, the Get It Done party. But we tend to pick sides. We say either all Republicans are evil or good, or all Democrats are idiots. Well, I don't know about you, Ambassador, but I've got bums in my family. So I got a bum factor. 20% of all whites are bums. 20% of all Blacks are bums. 20% of people in my family are bums. I love them, but they're bums. They act like bums. We need to change, we need to upgrade their software or call it out for what it is. So we have got to get out of the name calling. And it's not that a Black mayor or white mayor is better or worse, is they have different skill sets. The Black mayor may have more right brain connectivity to hope, well-being, engagement, faith, joy, love, compassion, but may not be better on balance sheets, income expense statements, left brain analytical work. Likewise, you might have somebody else who says, this is just about the numbers, forget about the human condition. Well, both of them are winning battles and losing wars. You need both. That was the magic of Ambassador Young, how he helped to turn this place into an international city. He got both. That was the magic of Dr. King, who took a moment that was important and made it feel urgent. I mean, Dr. King and Ambassador Young's brilliance of going into the South. And Dr. King would shut down the economy. And then he'd quietly send Ambassador Young to meet with 100 business leaders behind closed doors, after hours, with this mission. Talk without being offensive. Listen without being defensive. Always leave even your adversary with their dignity. Because if you don't, they'll spend the rest of your life trying to make you miserable. It becomes personal. Andy, he would say, I call him Ambassador Young, go cut a deal. Dr. King, Andrew Young would go in there. The whites would say, look, I don't care whether the person comes to the front door or the back door. I need the color of the currency to be green. My business is hurting. Then Andrew Young would say, take down the whites only signs. Think, you know this history. What came down? Who took down whites only signs down in the South? It wasn't government. It was the private sector.
Right.
So and then they would go to the government and say, now you need to take your signs down, or we're not going to reelect you. So you need a software upgrade. The reason that Black banks are not thriving, they have their hearts in the right place. They don't have capital. They may be running with 20-year-old software, 20-year-old management systems. They're not living in the new era. If you don't have technology in your nonprofit, your for-profit, your business, your bank today, you are not a growth company. You cannot be a growth company without the use of technology. 96% of all Black businesses don't even have an employee. They're sole proprietorships. So they're good at busyness, but not business. There's no business management. There's no balance sheet. There's no accounting department. There's no relationship with the banker, and the bank teller don't count. Okay. So how do you go apply for your PPP? It's like a perfect storm. I don't trust the government because of slavery. I don't trust banks because of the Freedmen's Bank. And I'm not prepared myself because I'm so busy slaying dragons that I don't have any preparation back here. So we have got to start with these false choices. You need the person who cares the most and who's best prepared. Okay,
let me ask you a question. You've been talking about civil rights as well as civil rights. You may be one of the most well-known people in Atlanta. You have been known to drive a fast car every now and then.
No, not a fast car, race car. I have a racing license.
Okay. When you're driving home and you're exceeding the speed limit and that you see a police car pulling up behind you, how are you treated?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. Ambassador Young, I know we just talked about this, would answer the same way in a different way, but the same way. Let's slow this down now and really unpack. This is my next book, Up From Nothing, comes out in October. I talk about this. Every person should understand that a Black person has three mentalities if they're going to succeed. a surviving mindset, a thriving mindset, and a winning mindset. The reason that there's not enough Black billionaires is there's not enough of us who've made it to the winning mindset. A winner believes they're a winner before they ever won anything, okay? Most of us have succeeded, got to the thriving mindset, which is the whole middle class dream and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But most Blacks are in a surviving mindset, which is why they never get off the mat. We're experts at racism, not on free enterprise. And that's a whole nother conversation. But when I get pulled over by the police, Ambassador, I immediately go to the surviving mindset. And here's what I say when the police officer pulls up. I look for the officer's name tag. Let's just say it's Smith. Hello, Officer Smith. Hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for your public service. Really appreciate what you do. Most of it is no good deed shall go unpunished. By the way, I know I did something wrong. I screwed something up. I was on the phone multitasking. My apologies in advance. What did I do wrong? With a nice little smile on my face. Because my job is to de-escalate, assuming he can't. And now I've created a whole new baseline of a relationship with him. I've respected him. I've acknowledged him as a human being. I called his name or her name. I acknowledged how tough their job is. I said thank you and appreciation. And I've already acknowledged that whatever you're about to say, I probably did. Mm-hmm. And I smiled a little bit to say, I'm no risk to you. And I've got my hand where he can see it, right? Or she. Now we're having a different conversation. It works 100% of the time. So a Black person has to work harder at basic justice than a white person or somebody else does because of all the things we've been talking about. It's just it's just what we're gonna have to do. And it's what I tell my nephew who's 20 years old before he leaves the house, is what every person who's a parent tells their children. You may not be judged by the content of your character. You may be judged by the color of your skin temporarily. Okay. Life is 10% what life does to you and 90% how you choose to respond to it. Right now, till we solve this, what's the response going to be? One of my employees just had a child. She happens to be Caucasian. And she said, John, I have to raise just a better child. That's how we solve this. I have got to raise, as a white woman, I've got to raise a better child to fix this for your future child.
John, one reason I love talking to you so much is that you are always so optimistic. And you're so optimistic that you took hope as your middle name. But what are you hopeful about now? Give us some optimism.
I'm hopeful that we won't have to argue on the other side of this, that environmental sustainability is a priority, i.e. COVID-19. I'm hopeful that we want to argue on the other side of this, that healthcare workers and those who are also providing services like delivery trucks and mail clerks and stockroom clerks and people who are allowing us to stay at home and to distance, that they are not afterthoughts, that they are primary thoughts, and they are part of our surviving and thriving mechanism in society and should be respected as such. Part of my optimism is that we will attack the wealth and inequality gap for the thing that it is, which is a threat to our democracy, all of our democracy. Part of what I hope for is that my rich friends understand that they need to help my poor friends if only to stay rich. Mm-hmm. Part of my hope is that we're going to make financial literacy federal policy make K through college a baseline mandate for all of God's children. Part of my philosophy and hope is that we realize that a house divided cannot stand, and building walls sounds sexy, but it is not nearly as interesting as building bridges.
John, I want to thank you so much. John Hope Bryant, CEO of Operation Hope. This has been a fabulous 45 minutes. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. At the end of these...
Well, I love you.
Man, you're terrific. I usually, at the end of these conversations, I usually ask people to make a donation to the World Affairs Council. Today, I'm going to ask you to make a donation to Operation Hope to help low-income Americans who are impacted by this economic crisis. It's www.operationhope.org. So you can find it. Yeah. It comes up right when you get on their website. While you're at it, if you want to make a donation to World Affairs Council, that'd be cool too. Yeah. That would be
We're
very
all in
neat.
this together.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. thank you, everybody, for spending 45 minutes with us, spending your lunch hour with us. And I want to thank the World Affairs Council staff, Fernanda Lukine Ishihara, who's our executive director, Valerin Lopez DeFrank, who keeps everything running, and Ladarian Gillette, who produces these Zoom programs for us. John, thank you once again. And to all of our audience, thank you. I hope to see you on Tuesday. We've got a program on U.S.-China relations at noon on Tuesday. Look on our website. It's going to be great. John, thanks again, man.
Peace and light. Love you, man.
I love you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.